Hello and good afternoon. It's lovely to see you, and it's a great privilege to host a conversation at ICBC. I have a lot of respect for Alex Rogers, and I think this is one of the best cannabis conferences that happens, which is why we have made an effort to come from Canada to come and be here today. Yeah. So whenever I'm asked to host a panel, I find that it's an opportunity for me to learn about something that I don't know about. And I seek out experts who have the knowledge that I don't have to study the subject and then to come and share with you. So I didn't really understand the complicated nuances of the German landscape for physicians and patients. And I wanted to understand it also with a global lens on what the experience is for both physicians and patients. And these are the experts that have been teaching me. And now we're going to share with you what our conversations have been. So I would love to first introduce to you Mr. Burkhard Blienert on the far end here. Yeah, I am learning that he is a bit of a hero in these realms in terms of regulatory reform. So Mr. Blienert was a member of the German parliament until 2017. He's a member of the Social Democratic Party. And he was responsible for the budget of the Federal Ministry of Health and the drug policy spokesperson for the Social Democratic Party. But he played a decisive role in shaping Germany's drug policy for the past 4 years. During his time in the parliament, Mr. Blienert was instrumental in the development of Germany's law on medical cannabis. One of the main objectives he had was to give patients access to cost-free medical cannabis, and he is directly responsible for making Germany's medical cannabis legislation more patient-friendly and less bureaucratic in several key ways right before it was passed, which we will discuss. On my right is Dr. Mark Ware, a dear friend and colleague. Dr. Ware has spent over 20 years researching uses of medical cannabis and teaching other physicians how to integrate cannabis into their clinical practice. He is Canopy Growth's chief medical officer and is responsible for the company's clinical research arm, Canopy Health Innovations, and Spektrum Cannabis. He is an associate professor in family medicine at McGill University and continues to practice pain medicine at the McGill University Health Centre. He's also acted as a key advisor on medical cannabis policy to the Canadian government in 2001, and he is recognized globally as a leader in medical cannabis research. He flew all last night to get here. Mark has been traveling and working a lot around the world with governments and physicians lately, and we're very lucky for him to have made the effort to come and be here with us today. Thank you. And to my left is Dr. Sebastian Schulz, who's the Director of Communications and Marketing for Spektrum Cannabis in Germany. His research is focused on the philosophy of neurocognition with a special focus on the psychotropic effects of cannabis. He's published many articles and 3 books regarding his research, and he has been working intimately with the medical cannabis market since it began in Germany. So I'm curious to know, how many of you live in Germany? Okay, and how many of you are from other parts of Europe? Okay, how many from North America? And do we have anybody from Asia in the room? Oh, hello, Asia. Nice to meet you. And did anybody make it all the way from Africa? No, okay. How many of you are from a country that has some kind of medical cannabis legislation? Okay, I hope next year that we see more hands in the room. And let's see where the ladies are. How many women do we have in the room? All right, excellent, thank you. And do we have any physicians in the room? Wonderful, lovely to have you. And is there anybody in the room who has been working with patients in Germany, helping them to navigate the process here? Do we have any patient advocates in the room? No, okay. Wonderful. I would love to speak with you afterwards, please. Yeah, always a real passion for talking to the people that are helping patients to navigate the process. So things are changing rapidly in terms of reform around medical cannabis around the world and in Germany. And I always believe that it's really important to take a look back and to have an understanding of where we came from as we're looking forward into our future. So we are going to start with a little bit of a history lesson about how we got to where we are in Germany. So Mr. Blienert, would you tell us a little bit about how medical cannabis became legal in Germany? Tell us a bit about the catalyst and what the process was like.
Ja, vielen Dank für die Frage, für mich die Möglichkeit, die einleitenden Worte eigentlich hier zu sagen. Erstens bin ich schuld, dass Sie jetzt immer diesen Translator nutzen müssen, weil ich nicht so fließend Englisch spreche, dass es jeder verstehen würde. Und deshalb hilft es schon, wenn ich auf Deutsch einfach beschreiben kann, wie die Geschichte gewesen ist. Für mich ist es ein Gebiet ja gewesen auch, ich bin weder Mediziner, ich bin kein Jurist, ich bin Politikwissenschaftler und bin 2013 mit dem Thema konfrontiert worden und mit all den Facetten, die mit Cannabis, medizinischem Cannabis und der allgemeinen Drogenpolitik zu tun haben. Und für mich war dann relativ schnell klar eigentlich, dass es im Bereich des medizinischen Einsatzes in Deutschland eigentlich jahrzehntelange Erfahrungen gibt, dass wir eine lange Geschichte damit haben, die irgendwann abgebrochen ist. Und dass wir in dieser Legislaturperiode, die jetzt bevorstand, 2013 bis 2017, die Chance haben, den großen Schritt zu tun, nämlich ein Gesetz zu machen, das es ermöglicht, eben wieder Cannabis in der Medizin einzusetzen. Es war schwierig in der großen Koalition für die Insider hier im Raum. Wir haben ja eine CDU-SPD-regierte Bundesregierung, geführte Bundesregierung 2013 schon gehabt auch. Und ein Teil der Regierung hat eigentlich überhaupt kein Interesse daran, in dem Bereich richtig was zu tun. Und hätten wir nicht die Gesetze, hätten wir nicht die Gesetze, die den Patienten ermöglicht haben im Laufe der Zeit, weil die geklagt haben, weil die gerne das weiter erfahren wollten, was sie erfolgreich für sich auch angewandt haben und deshalb die Ausnahmegenehmigungen brauchten. Und hätten wir die Gerichte nicht, die genau diese Patienten auch unterstützt haben, hätten wir, glaube ich, das Gesetz nicht gemacht. Erst die Gerichte haben die Politik tatsächlich unter Druck gesetzt, namentlich dann den Gesundheitsminister. Die haben dann noch Einspruch eingelegt, die haben das versucht zu verzögern, aber letztendlich war es gut, dass wir es dann in der Legislaturperiode auch gemacht haben. Letztendlich der Anstoß war eigentlich, dass Gerichte erlaubt haben, dass in Deutschland dann 2 Patienten selber Cannabis anbauen durften. Und der Eigenanbau war für einen Teil eben in der Regierung etwas, was sie sich überhaupt nicht vorstellen konnten, dass es dann mehr Leute vielleicht dann geben würde, die in ihrem Gärten, wo auch immer auf den Balkonen Cannabis anbauen durften. Und deshalb war der Druck dann da, ein Gesetz zu machen. Und dann sind wir eigentlich den üblichen Weg gegangen, wie Gesetze in Deutschland dann auch gemacht werden. Es gibt einen Referentenentwurf, es gibt lange Debatten, Anhörungen, wissenschaftliche Begleitung. Und letztendlich dann quasi die Nacht der Entscheidung, wo es dann zur 3. Lesung in Deutschland dann in den Bundestag kommen musste. Und bis auf den letzten Drücker haben wir dann versucht, Änderungen umzusetzen und einzuführen. Das hat funktioniert, darüber bin ich froh und stolz. Das Gesetz hat dann 100%ige Zustimmung im Bundestag erreicht. Und das für ein Gesetz, wo wir über Cannabis reden in Deutschland. Das ist schon etwas eigentlich Historisches gewesen, was wir da geschafft haben. Jetzt ist es 2 Jahre in Kraft. Ich meine, heute ist 1. April. Das ist so. Wir haben das Gesetz. Also es ist keine Verarsche. In Deutschland gibt es ja 1. April, schickt man die Menschen ja immer irgendwo hin in die Wüste. Nein, seit 2 Jahren haben wir es. Wir müssen das besser machen, reformieren, aber wir haben es. Das ist der große Schritt. Und auf meinen Gesprächen, Erfahrungen erzähle ich immer wieder gerne die Geschichte dazu, wie es gekommen ist, weil ich schon merke, dass viele, viele andere Länder im Moment auch nach Deutschland schauen. Wie habt ihr es gemacht? Was sind die Vorteile, die hier existieren und was können wir abkupfern, damit wir das gleich gute Gesetz vielleicht auch bei uns im Land auch umsetzen können? Ich finde, da sind wir auf einem guten Weg. Wenigstens in dem Bereich ist Deutschland mal wirklich wieder mal, Gott sei Dank, führend tatsächlich gewesen. In vielen anderen Bereichen hinken wir hinterher. Da kann ich mir vieles mehr vorstellen. Aber in dem Bereich tatsächlich erfahre ich sehr viel Zustimmung, auch eben außerhalb Deutschlands. Und das finde ich eigentlich ganz gut, dass ich einen Teil dazu beitragen konnte.
Thank you so much. And also, in the final hours before the proposed law became legislation, you fought very hard in the last hours for a couple of very important changes for patients, and thank you for that. Sebastian, you have been navigating the medical framework in Germany since it became law 2 years ago, with a particular awareness of the patient experience. And I'm wondering if you can speak to us about some of the unique aspects of the German medical cannabis landscape.
Yeah, it's very important for me to start with the perspective of the patients, because I agree very much with Burkhard Blienert that this law is a huge leap for this country and for a lot of patients we are now seeing. We're all sitting here, so it enabled a lot of patients to get access. And it's when I hear about the details of what you told me, it's an amazing process, and I really can value much more when I hear about the details of how it came to that law, how much you moved there. For the patients, though, in the last 2 years, it's been a very painful experience. To get access to cannabis, this was because I give you only a few aspects of that process. The 1,000 patients who had managed to get special licenses before the law came to place, it was we had like around 1,000 patients who got special permits. These were not just renewed, so they had to run through the system again, and some of them didn't get their medication and didn't get approved by doctors, so that was really painful for them. The other patients who were then able to access cannabis were bounced back from their doctors. Many of them were rejected because the doctors, of course, they didn't know the new law. They didn't know how to prescribe. Some of them just wanted to know, how do I do this? You know, what's the dosing? What's out there? So in the beginning, it was really hard for them to get to their medication. The prices went up for cannabis. We're going to talk about the reasons later. A lot of the patients only received private prescriptions. So you could say, hey, prices, why would that matter to the German patients? They get reimbursed. No, they didn't. In the beginning, only 30% of the applications went through. The insurances were slow to understand the new law, probably, and they rejected a lot of the applications. So for many patients, it was very frustrating. And then, of course, we heard it before, supply was a big deal. All the LPs coming in here, everybody who distributed cannabis we all had supply issues. The market exploded. And so we were able to give medication to a lot of people, to give medical cannabis to a lot more patients, but it was not easy to give it to them consistently and having it all available. So I think it's really important to have that patient perspective and to understand the German market, because it shows you how much frustration was there, how much criticism was there. There definitely need to be some improvements.
Can you tell me about two things? I would love to hear more about Regress, and also your ability to communicate with and educate and support patients in Germany.
Yeah, I would like to talk generally a little bit more about the regulations. So in Germany, and then I will pick up the Regress thing. So in Germany, every doctor, except for dentists and veterinarians, is allowed to prescribe cannabis. It's effectively a no-label substance, so it is classified as an ingredient to a medication, which gives it that status. A problem with that is that pharmacists then have to make an identity test and put 100% price margin on the product, which makes cannabis exceedingly expensive in the international comparison here. So it's like 22 euros a gram or something around that approximately, depending on how it's handled. The other thing so it's a no-label drug. It can be reimbursed. And basically the law states that it has to be reimbursed except for exceptional cases where the medical services of the insurance say, no, that's not a case where we reimburse. So that is a very special situation. The regress situation that you were talking about is one where doctors, we heard that a lot from doctors, they were afraid to prescribe. I mean, many doctors didn't want to prescribe for reimbursement because they were like, oh, we have to go through, they also have to go through a non-interventional form where they have to make observations about patients. So they have paperwork to do, and it's a difficult process to go through the application. And they were afraid then also, we heard that a lot from doctors, that they would get a regress problem. That would mean that the doctors actually, for their patients, they get the applications for them to get reimbursed, but later the insurances would have the ability to come back to them after a year or so and to evaluate the prescription patterns and say, hey, you're prescribing a very expensive medicine, so maybe we're taking away the money from you that you've taken out of the health system. So a lot of doctors, we haven't seen that happening yet, but in the beginning that was a big factor for doctors where they were like, whoops, we're not going to do that.
So that blew me away when I learned that if the insurance agencies assess that a doctor is overprescribing cannabis and is taxing the insurance system too much, they can go back and personally take that money out of a physician's bank account. That's a pretty serious deterrent. You have a comment. Please go ahead.
Ja, vielen Dank, Sebastian, dass du die Probleme jetzt schilderst, die wir im Moment tatsächlich auch haben. Ich will nochmal die Intention des Gesetzgebers eigentlich wiedergeben, was wir eigentlich beabsichtigt haben. Das aus meiner Sicht eines der wichtigsten Punkte ist, dass ein Patient erstens nicht austherapiert sein musste. Das haben wir gestrichen, das war vorher drin. Das ist ein wichtiger Punkt in der Frage auch. Tatsächlich hat der MDK eine Chance, einen Hebel, vielleicht dann doch die Genehmigung dann doch nicht auszusprechen. Und dadurch würde dann eben die Kostenerstattung durch die gesetzliche Krankenversicherung in Deutschland dann wegfallen. Also das finde ich eines der wichtigsten Punkte, die wir umgesetzt haben tatsächlich, dass es eben nicht unbedingt da die Einschränkung gibt in der Therapiefreiheit des Arztes. Erst muss ein Patient eigentlich den Leidensweg durchschritten haben, bevor er dann Cannabis tatsächlich irgendwie auch bekommt in unterschiedlichen Indikationen. Das Zweite ist, dass der MDK eigentlich nicht per se Nein sagen sollte, sondern er sollte der Hinderungsgrund für den MDK, etwas abzulehnen, haben wir erhöht. Das ist ein wichtiger Punkt. Denen fehlt natürlich die Evidenz an der Stelle. Wie nutzt denn der Arzt, auf welche Indikationen und wie setzt er es ein? Kann man nachvollziehen, aber er sollte es nicht eben per se durch 1, 2, 3 Hebel dann möglich gemacht werden, dass er das eben ablehnen konnte als MDK. Das war die Schnittstelle MDK. Die andere Schnittstelle in der Palliativmedizin brauchten wir eine extrem kurze Genehmigung durch den MDK. Auch das ist reingekommen. Das ist, glaube ich, dann der dritte Punkt, in dem Falle eben nach der Therapiefreiheit, nach der Nicht-Austherapiertheit, eben auch der Punkt in der Palliativ möglichst schnell einzusetzen, damit eben die Patienten halt ganz schnell in den Vorteil eigentlich auch kommen, dass Cannabis dort eingesetzt wird. Das war die Intention des Gesetzgebers.
Thank you. Do you have...
Yeah, just to comment on that, these are extremely valuable points, and I now, seeing the German market, how it unfolded, I can see how much of an effect, of a positive effect, those last changes you just mentioned had. I just don't want to mention two things. So what I said, the no-label situation is, of course, if you look at Ralph Meshulam's talk, Professor Ralph Meshulam's talk, it's great because a doctor here is not bound to indications. So, and we know that there's such a huge, wide spectrum of illnesses and indications where cannabis can help. But if you want to understand the dynamics of the German market, then you have to see this. There is this wide range where you can prescribe. The insurances have to cover, and now the insurances came back in the last years to say, oh, wait, the evidence situation for some of those indications is not really there. So this is, you understand the dynamics of the German market really well if you see that no-label situation and reimbursement.
And we will circle back around to talking more about evidence. Thank you, both of you. Dr. Ware, you have been teaching about the use of medical cannabis in clinical practice for decades. And I know that you have been working in many regions around the world recently as countries are evolving their framework around medical cannabis. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the physician experience, sort of the worldwide physician experience, and how it may differ from what's happening in Germany.
Thank you, Hilary. I think probably instead of contrasting it with what's happening in Germany, it's important to say that around the world, one of the single biggest challenges to the adoption of medical cannabis as a therapy is the fact that physicians are the ones who have to write the prescription or the authorization. They are the gatekeepers to this therapy. Rightly or wrongly, in some jurisdictions, nurse practitioners have this ability. In others, there are other health professionals who can do this. But by and large, around the world, it is a health care professional or physician who has the responsibility to decide whether this is an appropriate therapy for the patient, based on the guidance that they receive from their government, based on the regulations. But the vast majority of physicians have no idea what cannabis is, how it works, what the endocannabinoid system is. They are remarkably uneducated, and that's a phenomenal barrier. The challenge to educating physicians, to putting endocannabinoid physiology in medical schools, in teaching practitioners about using cannabis, is there's no government incentive for government to do this. The medical schools aren't stepping up and putting this into their curricula. It's falling on the industry to provide this education. And that creates another problem, because the cannabis industry is coming on the back of a long history of pharmaceutical companies having behaved rather badly when it comes to teaching physicians about their medicines, taking them for expensive holidays and paying their wives to come on their trips with them and taking them for fancy dinners and spending money on these physicians, knowing full well that that kind of behavior would influence their prescribing practices. This is now being regulated against, and we're hearing stories of big pharma companies being punished and being fined, and in some cases even being taken to court for some of the practices they've done with respect to physician education. So how is the industry supposed to respond to educating the people who are supposed to be providing this medicine? That's a phenomenal problem. It's global, and I think it requires a really interesting, the role of the nonprofit networks, the role of the patient advocacy organizations, somehow building an arm's length between the industry and the doctor so that the education gets where it needs to go, but isn't seen as an incentive or a payment to the physician to prescribe. There's some really dodgy practices happening out there. And I think we have to be very careful that in the aim of educating physicians, we aren't committing the same crimes that our predecessors in the pharma industry have committed.
Thank you. So Sebastian is talking about the hunger for more clinical research. I mean, that's true in Germany, and I think it's true, in many places around the world. In Canada, we have approximately 1% of our population is registered legal medical cannabis users. And if the ratio was the same in Germany, that would mean that we would have almost 800,000 people in Germany, and we're currently at 40,000 people in Germany, approximately, that are using the legal system. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the acceleration of research that's happening around the world and what you see that's coming on the horizon that is going to fill some of these needs.
Sure, so it's coupled with the physician education, because when you speak to, and I speak to roomfuls like this, but they're all physicians. I mean, I think there are 2 doctors in here. We need a lot more meetings where the room is filled with physicians and not as much business guys. No disrespect intended, but those are the people we have to be speaking to. But they will always stand up and say, well, there isn't enough evidence. Where's the data? Where are the clinical trials? Where's the proof that it works? I heard a panelist earlier just saying, it works, we know it works, you know it works. Okay, but the doctors don't think it works. They aren't being given the data in the same way. So we need to design ways to get evidence to them, which will then help them make these decisions. So the education is one part, but supplying the evidence is the other. There are sort of 2 main ways of doing this. One is through the standard randomized controlled trial, and that's a double-blind experiment where people are put on either the drug or placebo, and it really is considered as the gold standard of therapy. But these studies require very, very tightly controlled products, for one thing, and they require a lot of time and a lot of expertise. therapies and to invest in the kind of data to get drugs into the clinical trial and into the pipeline where they're approved as medicines costs tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to get there. So there has to be an investment in that. And I predict that in 10, 20 years, we will see far more cannabinoid medicines approved as therapies, and that's going to change the story completely, but it's going to take a long time to get there. The other thing we can do is actually provide patients with access to cannabis products and track their real-world experience. And this idea of real-world evidence is actually being now reviewed by regulators as a significant way of evaluating the effectiveness of drugs and other medicine, not just cannabis, but other drugs as well. And there's two concepts here. One is efficacy. A clinical trial will tell you if the drug is efficacious or not. But it doesn't tell you if it's effective. Effective is a real-world situation. Is it working for patients at large? And vast majority of people using cannabis are not clinical trial subjects. They are people with other problems, other diseases, taking other medications who probably wouldn't fit into the standard clinical trial. So following these patients as real-world evidence studies, open-label studies, this is the second arm of research that I think we can do. And this satisfies two major problems. One is getting patients access to the products and getting data to help inform physicians in future educational programs. So I think that's the approach we need to take in terms of developing evidence.
Thank you. Canopy has undertaken supporting quite a lot of research, and there's two particular projects that I'm wondering if you would share with us about. One is I'm wondering if you can talk about the professorship at the University of British Columbia and the clinical science that's happening there. And second, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the research in the long-term care facilities.
Thank you, Hilary. So sure, I'll touch quickly on these. Two major issues in Canada. I mean, they're not the only ones, but they're very sort of front and center in the discussion. One is the use of cannabis to help reduce the opioid abuse epidemic, the opioid overdose crisis, whatever you choose to call it. It's a massive problem in North America. Thousands of people are dying every month, and it's really a crisis of epic proportions. There's a potential that cannabis and cannabinoid medicines may assist in changing the direction of this epidemic. Professor M.J. Milloy and his colleagues at the University of British Columbia received a grant from Canopy, from the University of British Columbia, and from the government of BC, very much led by Hilary's leadership, I should add, that this gift to Dr. Milloy's team is enabling him to spend $2.5 million on evaluating whether cannabis can be helpful in helping people wean off intravenous street drugs, crack cocaine, methamphetamines, opioids, you name it. There's a potential there, and this is happening at the street level where they're going into the communities most affected and helping administer. This needs support. This kind of humanitarian crisis needs this kind of intervention. So we're very proud to support that. The other big issue is the nursing homes, where people with agitated dementias, people in elderly care, long-term care facilities are being asked, or their loved ones are approaching the units, the centers, if they can put their grandparents, their parents, their loved ones on cannabis because they think it helps them reduce the dementias and the agitation, help them sleep. And these are also people who are taking pretty strong antipsychotics, benzos, opioids to control them and help them sleep at night. There's good anecdotal evidence that this is helping, but we're proposing to follow these people by administering properly cannabinoid therapies and then tracking over time in a real-world manner what is the experience, what are the medication use patterns, profiles changing, and this study is ongoing at the moment. So two very different populations, but by taking compassionate approaches, we can provide medicines to people, but also track what happens in the real world.
Yeah, thank you. Canopy actually developed a new administration form in order to be able to work with long-term care facilities. We created soft gels, which is essentially little capsules, because the folks administering medicines in long-term care facilities didn't want to deal with inhalation or oil. The medicine needed to be stored and administered in the same way as all of their other medications were, which drove some innovation on our end, which is very exciting. Thank you. So we hope that we can see that there is evidence on the horizon that's coming to continue to give clinicians what they need to lean on to feel more comfortable using cannabis in their practice. But there are some other factors that are potentially going to be accelerants in the landscape in Germany that are coming up. Can you speak to that, please, Beth?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, of course, we're expecting the supply situation to get a lot better in the near future, of course, because we have to deliver GMP products. It's not, and I see that a lot from patients. We have very limited abilities to talk to patients because of the German advertising laws. We basically are restricted to talking to pharmacists and to doctors, healthcare practitioners. But it's what they don't see is that GMP facilities have to build up first, that we have to construct them. That is a very complicated, super high-tech process. We have a facility now in Odense in Denmark that's going to deliver a lot to the market, and others are building up. So the supply situation, not only in terms of quantity, but also in terms of having various varieties of cannabis, flowers, but also extracts and other products. That will completely change the market, of course. A second thing is that we see the insurance's approval rates going up. And I think I would like to add something to what Mark said, real-world evidence. In a situation where the insurances have to cover no-label substance, so to say, and they're like, well, we're covering now costs for somebody who has fibromyalgia, and we don't see really the evidence out there. We will have to introduce also socioeconomic data, showing in the country that cannabis can save costs. And we see that already from the Canadian market and from the US market, that in many places for years and years, the co-medication went down. We have studies on that. And so we can show for those places that, yes, patients who are using cannabis are using less other substances and are less costly for the system. So that's going to be very important for the German system. What we have done also, if we compare the Canadian and the German market, we have to always remember, and this is one of the most important points, and I keep on telling people like a mantra, the Canadian market started 15 years ago or longer, in 2001. And so we can use all the experience and the world, so the recognition of cannabis as a medicine is a completely different stage now worldwide, and we profit from that. We brought in Canadian doctors here to teach German doctors about their experience, really on a very how-to-do level, and that helped us a lot. And there's going to be other, not only clinical and other evidence coming in, but socioeconomic data will be generated here. So there are a lot of factors that will even accelerate a market where we already have seen an explosion of patient numbers. Just let me add one last comment about the number of 40,000. That was published by the Handelsblatt last year. Health-related data in Germany are very sensitive, so these are really rough estimates. We really can't extract exact numbers from those data, mainly also because many doctors make private prescriptions, and we can't really track them. So we don't know if like 50, 60, 80% of the prescriptions that are being done here are private, and we cannot really track those.
Thank you. So, Mark, some of the growing pains that Germany is going through around the medical cannabis landscape seem to echo some of the things that we experienced in Canada. And now in Canada, with almost 400,000 licensed legal patients, we've seen an incredible increase in the past couple of years. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the factors that you think really stabilized and encouraged more physicians to start using cannabis in their practice. Why did we see such a big uptake in the last few years?
I think a couple of things probably happened. If you look at the trajectory of Canadian cannabis patients over 20 years, it began very, very slowly. And the trajectory really only began to pick up in the last 5 to 10 years. And it happened at the same time as there were changes in the regulatory framework, which allowed there was a time in Canada where you only had one producer. There was only one type of cannabis. For a while, it was restricted to 5%. John Conroy probably remembers these days very well. One kind of cannabis grown in underground mines in Flin Flon, Manitoba. I mean, this was a limiting factor to just adoption. Patients didn't like it. They needed more access. So over the last 5 to 10 years, we saw increasing numbers of suppliers. We saw ranges of products. And I think that ability for patients to have access to a wider range made them more engaged in the process. The second thing was that the government began to allow the companies that were licensed to produce cannabis to make oils, extracts, soft gels, and alternative forms of cannabis products that weren't just cannabis flower, which of course was associated with smoking, even though there are medical devices approved as devices for delivering vapor to patients in Canada. But this availability of other form factors, I think, was another thing. For many physicians, a soft gel or an oil that contains so many milligrams of product per milliliter is a much more easy thing to think about as a medicine than a gram of dried flower at 18% THC and 1% CBD. For most physicians, this doesn't really mean much to them. They don't get what that, many doctors probably don't know what a gram of cannabis looks like. But this idea that they could have gel caps and oils and bottles and syringes where they could administer more titrated doses, I think this was a big factor. It certainly surprised many of us that the patients also responded to this. And it was around the end of last year, for the first time, that we saw the sale of oils and soft gels actually exceeding the sale of dried flower in Canada. And the sale of dried flower actually started dropping off. So patients were responding to this. It appears to be working for them. But of course, it's a relatively new thing. Stabilizing it and making them reproducible is another challenge, as anyone who does this work will realize. Making it into a pharmaceutical capsule is still a little bit of a ways away. But under the Canadian regulations, it was allowed, it's possible, and I think that was a big change.
Thank you. Okay.
Another accelerating factor that I see in Germany is now the first adopters here using full spectrum cannabis flowers and extracts are. First they looked at the metadata and they looked at the situation. Now they're seeing patients coming back to them and saying, oh, this helped me with this and this and this and this and this and that. So they're actually seeing the cases, and we talked to many of them. And so for doctors, and they have a lot of weight on their shoulders in Germany because, and that I forgot to mention that before, they really prescribe the product in Germany. It's not like they give you a prescription for medical cannabis. They actually put down the product that you're going to get in the pharmacy. And so for them, it's a lot of weight on their shoulders. And now they hear it from German doctors. They hear it from German doctors that this works. They're seeing the cases. And this is going to accelerate, I think, in this year. This is going to accelerate because it's becoming tangible now. It's not just like Canadian experience and the metadata situation. It's really there. It's coming.
Yeah, I just want to support that because I think word of mouth is tremendously popular. Or tremendously powerful in this approach. Doctors talking to each other. They're not getting this information from their medical schools, from their associations, from their various syndicates. They're hearing it from each other. And when they try it and they see a few patients that benefit, and if they know how to do it properly, they then see these differences, they talk to each other. And I think a lot of the growth, there are something like 17,000 physicians in Canada now who have written at least one authorization. And that's about 12-15% of the Canadian physicians. Not because they're being taught about it by the industry or by their medical schools, but because they're learning and telling each other about this, and their patients are coming and telling them. So that's a kind of a groundswell of education that's happening just from pure experience.
And many patients are learning the same way, right? Patients supporting each other.
Uns war die Rolle der Ärzte beim Gesetzgebungsprozess auch bekannt und wichtig. Das war die haben die Belastung, die haben die Verantwortung an der Stelle. Deshalb haben wir es reingeschrieben eigentlich auch, dass es Weiterbildungsangebote durch die Ärztekammer geben sollte, dass es da eine permanente Nacharbeit, Verpflichtung auch gibt. Das war auch richtig so. Bei der Evaluierung jetzt, wir müssen eigentlich einfordern tatsächlich, dass wir all diese Punkte auch erfassen, dass da der Staat, letztendlich der Gesetzgeber in der Verantwortung steht, auch dafür zu sorgen, aus diesen Erfahrungen auch zu lernen, was geht schief oder haben wir zu wenig in dem Bereich und wo müssen wir danach steuern. Der andere Punkt, die Frage von Forschung, war unser Anliegen, eigentlich mein Anliegen auch gewesen, dass wir eine staatliche Förderung anfangen, dass wir da schon die Wege bereiten, weil wir diese Forschung für die Evidenz, für die Glaubwürdigkeit unbedingt brauchen. Und da muss der Gesetzgeber eigentlich jetzt langsam mal nachholen, auch da die Rahmenbedingungen zu schaffen, dass wir da eine ganz andere Struktur hinbekommen aus den Erfahrungen natürlich weltweit, aber insbesondere dann jetzt hier in Deutschland auch davon lernen zu können. Und das ist eine Geschichte, gerade jetzt in der Anfangsphase, nach 2 Jahren finde ich dringend notwendig, dass wir da ein Signal setzen, ja, wir wollen da rein und das ist notwendig. Und der dritte Punkt eigentlich, wo die Bundesregierung jetzt tätig sein sollte, ist aus meiner Sicht, internationale Rahmenbedingungen zu verändern. Also der Antreiber zu sein, genauer hinzuschauen, wo können wir bei CBD und der Einschätzung weitergehen, was ist da der Ansatz, weil wir diese internationalen Regelungen unbedingt brauchen, um Erleichterungen natürlich auch hier in Deutschland wiederum gesetzgeberisch umzusetzen. Da finde ich, kann die Bundesregierung wirklich auch den Faden aufnehmen und wieder mit vorne dabei sein.
But Mr. Blienert, speaking of new laws, there is a new proposed bill in your parliament, and I know that this is not a law that you have written, so you might not like it as much as you did the last one, but I'm wondering if you can speak to us about the proposed bill and what you think what the implications will be for patients and physicians, and what you think the likelihood is of it becoming law.
Ja, was der Gesundheitsminister vorgeschlagen hat an 2 Punkten, das ist schon mal sinnvoll und richtig. Der erste Punkt ist an der Frage des Preises, der Apotheken, des Apothekerzuschlags zu arbeiten. Und der zweite Punkt, bei einer Folgemedikation muss nicht ein neuer Antrag gestellt werden. Das sind schon gute Hebel, die man auf jeden Fall nehmen soll. Mein Vorschlag war eigentlich, dass wir direkt am Anfang der Legislaturperiode, hätte ich gemacht, einen runden Tisch eingeführt hätten, um die Leute, die Beteiligten, die Ärzte, die Apotheker, auch die Hersteller, die Politik zusammenzuholen und zu gucken, die Patientenvertreter, wo hakt es, was sind die Punkte, die man irgendwie jetzt untergesetzlich regeln kann und wozu brauchen wir dann ein Gesetz. Im Moment haben wir da wieder ein Gesetz mit 2 wichtigen Punkten, wenn die kommen, ist gut. Wir haben die Opposition, die hat nochmal eigene Vorschläge gebracht. Das ist auch in Ordnung, das ist eben das parlamentarische Geschäft. Aber wir verlieren dadurch Zeit und wir sind nicht pragmatisch in dem Wege, dass wir das besser machen können und schneller besser machen können, sondern begeben uns jetzt wieder in die Mühlen der Parteipolitik, in der Mehrheitsverhältnisse und. Halte ich eher, gerade deshalb, weil es eben ein neues Gesetz war, für einen nicht so innovativen Weg. Also ein runder Tisch hätte mir viel, viel besser gefallen, wo wir ganz schnell vielleicht auch die Probleme, die Sorgen der Krankenkassen, dass die Kosten steigen, die Frage der Ärzte mit Regress, die Frage bei den Apotheken, wie bleiben die eventuell auf den Kosten sitzen, wenn das Rezept falsch ausgestellt ist und, hätte man da schon irgendwie viel, viel besser benennen können, klären können und dann die notwendigen Schritte auch umsetzen können. Das hätte auch für eine Akzeptanz, glaube ich, in der Bevölkerung nochmal zusätzlich geführt und hätte wahrgenommen, dass die Menschen, die jetzt im Moment eigentlich hellhörig sind, kann das helfen und sonst wie, ja im Altersdurchschnitt gerade steigen. Das ist ja die 60-Plus-Generation, die da eher enorm hinschaut, kann es mir helfen, weil gerade im Alter kommen ja dann die Probleme mit Arthrose, Schmerzen etc. Das wissen Sie alles besser. Und auf diese Veränderung müssen wir uns doch einstellen als Gesetzgeber. Und da hätte ich mir gewünscht, dass die Politik da ein bisschen sensibler in den letzten 16 Monaten eigentlich schon gewesen wäre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blienert. I think it's an incredible thing that as a part of the German law that healthcare insurance has been covered. It's one of the things that we're still fighting for in Canada, for patients to be able to afford their cannabis. And I think that that particular aspect of the legislation that you're responsible for, you've shown tremendous global leadership and you have set the standard for hopefully the rest of Europe and the rest of the country that I hope will catch up with your vision. So thank you. So that is all of the time that we have. I want to really acknowledge and thank my fellow panelists who are incredibly busy creating medical cannabis access around the world, who have been working on it for a very long time. Thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you.
We maybe have time for one. Do you have time for one question? He looks very excited. Maybe 2 questions. You guys both look excited. 2 questions. Hold on a minute.
Thanks very much. So at our MedPayRx workshops, we're bringing in doctors, we're bringing in pharmacists, manufacturers, distributors, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm often thinking, you're talking about how to advocate, but does a company like yours, do you actually have a blueprint that we can actually follow here in Germany, how to take the steps to actually go about organizing the doctors and educating them? Is there a blueprint that already exists that we can follow?
So I'll go back pre-Canopy to my McGill days, and we published a paper in a journal called the Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics. And we actually published what we call the cannabis curriculum, which was a kind of a step-by-step guide of what doctors should know about the plant and biology and endocannabinoids, safety, efficacy, blah, blah, blah. So there do exist these templates. The way in which you deliver that to physicians depends on the jurisdiction. A lot of doctors like to learn in small groups so they can talk to each other and exchange information and ideas. Some like to learn online, so the idea of having online webinars or modules that they can go and check in. It's really important that these programs be accredited by their governing agencies, so they get credit for doing the courses. This is often a huge currency for them. And this actually speaks to the government's willingness to inform them, because if they can get 12 CME credits for having done into medical education, they can tick a box that says, yes, I did some training, I got some CME credits, which is good for my medical board that shows that I'm getting my CMEs, and I'm learning something cool and new. And for a lot of doctors, this is a totally new and exciting area. So when they get into it, they start going, holy shit, I had no idea that this stuff was doing what it does. And then you've got another excited person to lead the discussion. So just creating the focus any way that they like it, so that it's accredited and comprehensive, should do it.
This isn't intended.
Uh-oh, the troublemaker.
I was going to say, this isn't intended as a cross-examination question. If it was, I would say, isn't it true that?
Mark, John, I'm used to you defending me and having my back, not being at the...
I just wanted to comment on Dr. Ware's remarks about research and so on. I've learned as a lawyer that there were, some 10 royal commissions of inquiry going back to 1893, the Indian Hemp Drug Commission, up to at least our Senate, in 2003. There's 20,000 PubMed studies up there that you can access online. And significantly, I think, in terms of the opiate crisis, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine surveyed all of the existing studies, commented on how difficult it has been to do the research, but said, notwithstanding that, there is conclusive evidence that it is effective for chronic pain. So what is the problem, doctors, in terms of, there is the evidence. Sure, we can always do more studies, but as you pointed out, the Dr. Malloy and the group at UBC and St. Paul's is doing a tremendous job and have reduced opiate deaths so far. So come on, medical profession, get on board.
I don't know if it's the medical profession. You're expecting politicians to have common sense, which is hard to find all over the world. It's got nothing to do. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But, it's very frustrating for everyone throughout the world.
I think there was a question in there which I'll try and respond to. And all I'll do is reflect the fact that, yes, the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, Medicine, conclusive evidence, I'm fully aware of that. But I can point to 5 other meta-analysis, systematic reviews that concluded that there is no evidence that cannabis treats pain. So doctors will choose the story that they think fits their narrative. And this is the problem. They're looking at the same studies. It's the same body of data. It's astonishes me that you can have groups, and some of them came out of Germany, some of them are European pain federations. They've come Australian groups have come up with these conclusions that suggest that the evidence is not that strong. So you have this conflicting opinion out there, and doctors are still polarized. I hear you, the evidence appears quite comprehensive, but it's not the clinical trial stuff, and they will always point to the lack of randomized control trials. That's still the currency that they need to speak. So that's the lack of evidence that they're talking about.
Okay, and Sebastian wants the last word.
I just want to say 2 sentences to both of you, basically. In Germany, I think it's really important, also because of what Mark said before, that we give balanced information, that we are very careful not to seem to advertise, not to exaggerate claims. So that's as a general recommendation to everybody out there. Here, people are specifically skeptic about the whole pharma system and pharma companies doing damage, and I think that's what we stand for, to give out balanced, detailed, and to be well informed, and that's something that you should always consider doing here in Germany, I think.
And that. Okay.
Thank you. There is Alaya from Cannabis Salud, Colombia. This is a question for Mr. Schulz. Why is it cannabis so expensive in Germany? You said that pharmacies, they have to add double the price. Why is that?
Well, that comes because of the classification of cannabis as an ingredient. So it goes to the pharmacy, and the pharmacists have to do an identity test. And so according to their statutes, they put 100% price upcharge. The new law is supposed to bring that price down also. We don't know how that's going to happen because there's no specific thing that's written in the draft of the new law, but I think there's a big political will now to get the price down of cannabis in Germany. Because like I said, it's a gram of medical cannabis flowers now costs in Germany around 22 euros or so. So that's a lot.
Listen, you can call me. I know a guy. He can get it for you like 12 euros.
Yeah.
I mean, no, don't call me. Like, just send me a message. I'll relay it. That's it. Thank you all very much. Let's hear it again for this wonderful, fabulous panel.